Good morning. As we ended the fasting at my church last night, God is still speaking to my heart. And He reminded me of a few conversations, one of which I had with a sister at the church several months ago. And she asked me, why Ecclesia? Why am I at Ecclesia Christian Fellowship? And we were both greeters. That was one of our ministries. And so we were standing out there fellowshipping and greeting other people as well. And so I was, trying to explain to her why I believe God sent me there. One of many reasons. But then, time came where it was time for us to go into the church for church service, and we never really finished that conversation. And then this past Sunday, when Pastor asked those who needed prayer to come up to the altar, another lady asked me while we were both waiting to be prayed with, was I fulfilling the will of the Lord? And she had to ask me that like 2 or 3 times, partly because I couldn't hear her. But I was also praying through it, and I said, I just don't know. It's my goal, it's my desire. And the pastor is also really talking about submitting to what you do know that God wants you to do, and submitting to the authority of your leaders. So God has just really been speaking to me, and even though the devil tries to block it, God overrules and He overpowers. So I was thinking about when I was a child living in my first foster home. The grandfather of that family was a white man, and he pastored an all-black church. That had to have been in the 50s and 60s. And thinking about how segregated, even more so, our world probably was back in those times. But that church invited and wanted him there. And then I used to go to another church as an adult, and the church was more diverted then than they are now, but more segregated than I remember growing up. And I have a very diverse biological family. And in my own personal life, in many different ways, as far as walking out my Christian life in front of a lot of my family, I failed. I failed in a lot of areas. But I'm thankful that they are seeing that God has got a hold of me again. I'm not perfect. I still stumble. There's still areas in my life that I know God is still working on me in. And so thinking about my very diverse family and the fact that even growing up when I was no longer in that foster home, but in several others, the majority of my friends growing up were Black and Mexican. So I'm not new to diversity. I would say I'm actually more new to segregation. And it's uncomfortable. And so I was thinking about unity and diversity in the church. And I can bet that most of us would agree that we want segregation to end. We want racism to end. And it must start in the church. Because the world sure isn't going to do it. And so I'm going to read to you from the New King James Version, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 23. For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit. For in fact the body is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not the body? And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I had no need for you, nor again the head to the feet, I had no need for you. No, much rather those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow great honor, and our unpresentable parts have great modesty. So as we see, God sees us all the same. He didn't die for only the black people. He didn't die for only the white people. He didn't die for the Mexicans, the Indians, the Italians, and all the other nationalities that he created. He died for all of us. So that is one part why I believe I'm at Ecclesia. And then you read over here in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, again in the New King James Version. Come to me, all who are labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Again, he didn't say, come to me, a certain nationality. He didn't say, come to me, all who got your life together. Then come to me. No, he said, come to me, everybody. Because God doesn't reject nobody who sincerely comes to him and says, God, I'm a mess. Take over my life. Forgive me of everything I've done against you. And make me new. He's just waiting for us to come to him. And then in Matthew 18, verse 21 and 22, again in the New King James Version, then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. I mean, can you imagine trying to keep track of how many times maybe one individual has done you wrong or said something wrong to you? Because if you're keeping track, you haven't truly forgiven them. Now, I understand sometimes when a person continuously does the same thing over and over and over. I've experienced that. Somebody says, "Oh, I'm sorry," but you don't see or hear the sincerity because they are repeatedly doing the same thing without effort to change. Then I'm reminded that non-believers, people who are not under the authority of God because they choose not to be, we can't expect them to live like a Christian person. And one person in particular that God has removed from this earth now, and I don't know where she is in this world now, in eternity. But I remember before she passed, I want to say it was probably the 3rd time I had told her that I forgave her for all the times and all the things that she's done to me in our past. The first 2 times she pretty much laughed to my face. But I think God spoke to her heart and she knew she was getting ready to meet our Maker. And I pray, in spite of everything, that God truly got a hold of her heart. Because it was only a day or 2 before she had passed that I was able to again call her and say, Mom, I want you to know that I forgive you. And do you know that God forgives you? And I want to say that was probably the most peaceful conversation my mother and I ever had. I wish it would have been earlier in my life. But most of me is happy and praying that she truly made peace with God before she left this earth in 2017. So that's just a little bit more about who I am, why I'm at Ecclesia, and how important not only my biological family is, but how important my church family is to me, and thankful that they truly walk out what God preaches in forgiveness. God bless you all. Have a beautiful day.